The chapel went still the instant my mother's voice sliced through the room. "You changed your name." Not surprise, judgment. Every face turned toward us. My father's fingers clamped around the program. My brother froze mid-laugh in the doorway. I slipped into the second-row seat, the paper still warm in my hand, my new name printed in an ink so dark it felt intentional. The chair beside me, the one labeled family, stayed empty, just like every milestone they'd skipped. But as I stared at that untouched seat, something inside me shifted. They thought today's silence revealed something about me. They had no idea it was revealing them. I grew up learning how to fold myself smaller between lives louder than mine. In our Austin house, noise meant significance, and significance was never assigned to me. I can still hear my mother's heels striking the tile whenever Brendan needed anything loud, sharp, urgent, in a way my needs never seemed to be. Vivian always earned the soft voice, the warm palms on her shoulders, the attention that made the room lean in her direction. I was the quiet one. The girl who cleaned up after herself, packed her own lunches, and learned early not to interrupt conversations that washed right over her like a current. The first time I recognized the pattern, I was 12. Vivian had an art show at school, a line of painted canvases propped against the gym wall. My mother hovered proudly at her side, straightening imaginary lint from her dress, chatting with neighbors. I stayed off to the side, clutching the certificate I'd received that morning for a regional science competition. No one from my family had come. They didn't even remember the time. Mom brushed past me like I was scenery. "Hold your sister's jacket," she said, placing the soft fabric in my hands without a glance. I slipped the certificate into my pocket, the crinkling paper loud enough to echo. No one heard it. Years later, at my high school graduation, they showed up late. The ceremony had already begun. My row shifted awkwardly to let them through as they searched for seats. When my name was called, I scanned the crowd for the 4 faces that mattered. Only one seat in the family section was empty, mine. My siblings had gone to a lake party, and my parents were stuck in traffic, though I found out later they'd stopped for coffee. I squeezed the program so hard the corner tore. I swallowed the ache and lowered myself back into my chair as if slow, careful movements could disguise the hollow space around me. College wasn't any different. At Rice, I sent reminders weeks in advance for a departmental award ceremony. Vivian replied with a heart emoji. Brendan left it on scene. My parents answered 3 days later with a breezy, "Well try." They never came. That night, I sat alone on the dorm steps eating takeout, the award resting beside me, still sealed in the envelope they hadn't cared to open. The older I got, the smaller I became. Every attempt to speak up ended with Mom's familiar line. "Don't be dramatic, Evelyn." Dad would nod without looking up from his phone. My objections grew shorter every year until they disappeared completely. The final memory that clung to me, sharp as a splinter, was the conference where I presented early research on desalination. 5 seats reserved. All empty. I held the program folded in my hands, smoothing the same crease over and over, pretending the vacant space beside me wasn't glaring. My phone buzzed, a photo from Brendan grilling at a backyard party. "Wish you were here," he wrote. He didn't. That was the day I understood my role in the family, a quiet outline at the edge of their lives, visible only when I stayed silent. The change didn't strike all at once. It gathered slowly, pressure building behind a door I'd kept shut for years. But the day it finally cracked was ordinary, calm, deceptively mundane. 8 months before my dissertation defense, I sent the announcement to my family, a polished notice from the university, date and time printed in crisp black type. I mailed it to the house in Austin, sent a text reminder, posted it in the family group chat. April 22nd, 3 p.m., I wrote. My mother responded hours later with a distracted, "So proud, sweetheart." Vivian sent a thumbs up. Brendan typed, "Nice." I convinced myself that was enough. All winter, I repeated the date at every Sunday dinner. Mom nodded without looking up from her phone. Dad made a vague sound that might have been agreement. Vivian chatted about her kids' soccer calendars. Brendan drifted back to discussing whatever he'd been grilling lately. Still, I repeated it to them. 5 months. 3 months. 6 weeks. 2. Each reminder felt like tapping on a window sealed shut, the sound swallowed before it reached anyone on the other side. Then February came, and Brendan posted his announcement. Spring Barbecue Bash. The graphic read, April 22nd, 1 to 6 p.m. I stared at my phone until the image started to smear into static. When I called him, he genuinely sounded baffled. "What time is your thing again?" he asked, as if he hadn't heard me say it a dozen times. 3, I said. "People can go to both," he insisted. "Just swing by after." Stanford was an hour away. He knew that. He just didn't care. I called Mom next. She let out a gentle laugh. "Honey, don't make this into a big deal. We'll figure something out." But I felt the truth then, soft, sinking, undeniable. They weren't mistaken. They weren't overloaded. They simply chose a different priority, a different person. Like they always did. The final confirmation came the day before my defense. Mom picked up over a blur of loud music, her voice thin between bursts of laughter. "I'm at Brendan's helping him set up," she said. "It's total chaos." "And tomorrow?" I asked. 3 o'clock, right? "We'll be there," she said, clearly distracted. "Vivian's bringing dessert." She hung up before I could answer. The next afternoon, standing in the hallway outside Patterson Hall, my phone buzzed. "Where are you?" Mom asked. "We're all at Brendan's." I didn't reply right away. I let the silence settle, heavy and final, between us. And in that quiet, something inside me clicked into place. I didn't cry in that hallway. I didn't call anyone back. I didn't explain. I gathered my notes, walked into the auditorium, and defended 8 years of work before a room missing 5 faces that should have been there. And when it ended, when "Congratulations, Dr. Evelyn Brennan" echoed across the chamber, I felt nothing except a familiar ache, so old it had worn itself smooth. That night, while messages from my family stacked up unread on my phone, I sat alone in my apartment with the blinds half drawn, the glow of my desk lamp stretching across piles of research, my laptop, and the ceremony program. I pressed my thumb along the fold running down its center one last time. Then I opened my laptop and created a folder called Transition. No emotion. No pause. Just a folder and the first step toward a life they would no longer have access to. I began with the fundamentals. I downloaded the name change petition from the county website and printed it. The quiet hum of the printer felt strangely steadying. Instruction pages. Required documents. ID rules. I highlighted each section with calm, deliberate strokes. My pen didn't hesitate once. Next, my financial accounts. I logged into every one, updated contact details, saved statements into a new subfolder titled Records. I exported 2 spreadsheets, one listing every account tied to my old name, another outlining how each would transfer to my new one. It wasn't revenge. It was order. By midnight, that folder held more stability than my family had given me in years. The next morning I woke early. Cool air. Sharp sunlight cutting through the blinds. I brewed coffee and watched the steam curl upward while I reviewed the petition one last time. Then I changed, navy blouse, pressed slacks, hair pulled back, and drove to the county courthouse. The building stood pale and still against the sky. Inside, the clerk slid a stack of forms toward me. "Fill these out," she said. I nodded, sat by the window, and began. Line by line, signature by signature, my new name Evelyn Morrison settled into each blank space like it had always belonged there. When I returned the forms, the clerk stamped the top page. The sound was clean and final. "Processing takes a few weeks," she said. "That's fine," I answered. Outside, the sunlight felt different, cleaner, no longer something I had to earn. The next phase took days, quiet ones. I updated my email first, a fresh address with no ties to family. I moved all my research to a new cloud drive and deleted the old one. I archived messages from colleagues, mentors, and friends. The only thing I didn't erase was a tiny folder titled Ruth, filled with photos of my grandmother and the birthday letters she'd sent me all through college. Her handwriting had always looked steady, even when mine used to shake. By the end of the week, My online world no longer carried the name Brennan anywhere. Then came the physical shift. I packed up my place, books arranged in clean stacks, clothes folded into long, even lines, picture frames turned face down and wrapped in paper. The night before the movers came, I stood in the middle of the living room, listening to the gentle whir of the refrigerator and the faint glow hum of the street lamp outside. My phone kept lighting up every few minutes, calls, messages, attempts to reach for something they'd never truly held. I ignored all of them. When the moving truck pulled away with everything I owned headed toward Portland, I locked the apartment door behind me and let my palm rest on the cool metal. Not nostalgia, just stillness. The drive north lasted 2 days. Long stretches of road, muted radio chatter, half-empty rest stops with buzzing vending machines. I stopped only for gas and coffee. Every mile felt like another thread dissolving, thin, frayed ties falling away behind me. Portland welcomed me with a grey sky and a gentle drizzle. Perfect, I thought. A place where quiet didn't feel like punishment, but like breath. My new apartment was small but full of light, with a narrow balcony overlooking a calm, tree-lined street. I set my boxes by the window and opened the one marked work, research papers, a notebook, and a single photo of me and my grandmother at an old birthday dinner. I pinned it above my desk. The next morning, I walked into the environmental consulting firm that had hired me months before. The receptionist greeted me kindly. My new co-workers introduced themselves one after another. No one mentioned family. No one compared me to a sibling. I sat down at my fresh desk, logged into my new account, and felt a strange steadiness settle into my chest. In the evenings, I kept doing the quiet work. I updated the name on my driver's license, changed my voter registration, corrected my medical records, reassigned emergency contacts, closed the final bank account with the old surname. Each task made its own small sound, the tap of keys, the click of a button, the gentle tear of an envelope. Not dramatic, not victorious, just deliberate, contained, mine. Some nights I'd sit at my desk with the window cracked open, letting cool air drift inside. I'd reach for a form, a bill, a document, and feel that familiar tightness in my chest loosen a little more. This time, I thought, sliding another sheet into the finished folder, I'm not fixing what they damaged. It wasn't a promise, just a boundary. Finally written out. Weeks after settling in, the notification appeared on a grey morning. Your name change petition has been approved. A simple line. A quiet switch flipped. I printed it, the paper still warm as I tucked it into a folder labeled Identity. The new documents, license, bank cards, workplace records were already in the process of updating. Soon nothing would bear the name my family had forgotten by choice. I didn't announce it. I didn't reach out. I just lived. But silence tends to echo when people expect noise. The first ripple came through an email HR forwarded to my new inbox. Your emergency contact attempted access. My old number was disconnected. My old email archived. My personnel file marked them as an unverified relationship. The system shut them out automatically. The next ripple arrived the following week. The apartment manager back in Austin left a voicemail on my new work line. Your family has been trying to get your forwarding address. We cannot release it without written permission. I gave none. A month later, I powered on the old phone I kept buried in a drawer. 83 missed calls from my mother. Dozens from Vivian. A handful from Brendan. One from my father. Each voicemail more frantic than the one before. Where are you? This isn't a joke. We need to talk about the graduation. You're overreacting. You can't just disappear. This silence is immature. You owe us an explanation. I didn't owe them anything. I shut off the phone and slid it back into the drawer. The air lifted a little, like a pressure finally released. Then everything shifted at once. Great-Aunt Ruth passed away, calmly, gently. She was one of the rare people who ever truly understood me, and I knew I had to go. Not for my family. For her. The chapel in Austin looked exactly as it had the last time I was there: polished wood, muted lights, the scent of lilies hanging thick in the air. I arrived early and chose a seat near the aisle, fingers wrapped around the printed program. The name on the cover, Evelyn Morrison, still unsettled my family, but it felt right to me. It felt like mine. They entered all at once. My mother froze the second she saw me. "You changed your name." Not a question, an accusation. My father's jaw clenched. Vivian stared like she couldn't make sense of my face. Brendan looked winded, as if someone had punched the breath out of him. Their eyes kept moving. "Program, me, program again." "You should have told us," Mom murmured. "You should have shown up," I answered, my voice steady. She inhaled sharply, ready to push back, but the chapel attendant lifted a hand for silence. All through the service, their attention stayed on me more than the pastor. Every so often, Mom's gaze slid my way, bewildered, irritated, maybe even frightened. The kind of fear people feel when a map they trusted is suddenly redrawn without their permission. After the last hymn, she followed me outside. "Evelyn, this isn't fair," she whispered. "We made a mistake. Families move on." I stood beside my rental car, the breeze tugging lightly at my coat. "You chose a barbecue instead of my doctorate," I said. "You didn't forget, you decided." "That's the truth." "That's not fair." "It is," I replied. "And the systems I live inside only acknowledge the ones who show up. You weren't on the list." Everything else unfolded from that. Her expression tightened as the realization sank in. There was nothing she could say to reverse a court order, a state document, a digital identity. Love could be claimed aloud, but bureaucratic records didn't bow to guilt. Vivian stepped forward next. "You didn't have to take it this far," she said. "I didn't go far," I told her. "I went where I was seen." Brendan stayed silent. I got into the car, closed the door, and watched their outlines blur through the windshield. They couldn't follow legally, digitally, or emotionally. The life that belonged to my old name had ended quietly. The life tied to my new one had already begun. And for once, the loss wasn't mine. Portland wrapped around me the way evening settles over a cooling street, soft, unhurried, gently indifferent. Months drifted by, and my new rhythms formed on their own. I walked to work beneath low gray clouds. I brewed coffee in my tiny apartment kitchen, the sound of the water filling the stillness instead of interrupting it. On my desk, drafts of water reclamation models lay spread out in careful lines, the morning light smoothing the rough edges of my day. Little by little, the quiet stopped feeling strange. My name, Evelyn Morrison, appeared on memos, email signatures, project briefs. Each time I saw it, something inside me settled deeper into place. In meetings, colleagues asked for my thoughts without holding me up against anyone else. After work, someone from the office would ask me to grab coffee, or Alex would meet me at a tiny cafe tucked between two brick buildings. He paid attention. He remembered small things. He asked about the desalination project I'd been developing for years, and his interest wasn't performative. It was real. Some nights, I'd sit on my balcony with a blanket around my shoulders, the city humming softly below. Rain traced thin paths down the railing, calm and unhurried. I thought about the empty seat at my defense, the one I stared at for a long breath before I began speaking. The memory still surfaced now and then, but it didn't sting anymore. It was flat, distant, like a photograph tucked in an old drawer. I didn't hate them. That surprised me. Hatred is heavy, and I wasn't carrying theirs anymore. The paperwork had done something I couldn't manage alone. It drew a clean line. Not a barricade, just a boundary. On one side was the life where I waited to be chosen. On the other was the life where I didn't have to. When I walked out of that courthouse months earlier, I wasn't running from my family. I was walking toward myself, toward a name that belonged to someone who showed up for me, even when no one else did. Now, in the misty quiet of an Oregon evening, I understood something quieter than forgiveness, simpler than closure. I wasn't lost anymore. I'd arrived. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're proof of where you've finally learned to stand. My family spent years overlooking me in rooms I worked hard to enter. So I built a life in a place where showing up wasn't negotiable. Now, when I sign my name Evelyn Morrison, the silence that follows isn't hollow. It's mine. And some doors stay closed simply because I no longer need to walk through them.